So hello and welcome to CraftyDoctor's YouTube channel. So in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make a custom build Gravity Falls themed PC using the Ryzen 7 3700X, AMD's new processor for 2019. And hopefully, if I ever get round to it, the video description will hopefully contain some Amazon affiliate links which will not cost you any more money to purchase. It just means that I get a small cut in the profits that go towards the channel. So if that's something you're interested in, please do carry on watching. Okay, so to start with, these are the components I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using an XFX Pro 650 watt. That's donated from an older PC. That's non-modular. Next up is the case, which is an NZXT H500i mid-tower in white. The reason I'm using that is because the RGBs in there are already pre-installed. Motherboard is an Asus Prime X570 Pro. Again, got some nice subtle RGB lighting built into the board. Next up is the processor, new for 2019, the AMD Ryzen 7. I am using the 3rd gen 3700X. Next up is the RAM. Again, I picked this RAM because of the RGB colouring, but it's the Corsair Vengeance RGB DDR4 2x 8GB sticks running at 3200. You can go quicker if you feel you need to. And the Corsair SSD MP510 Gen 3 M.2. Gone for the 960GB. And then again, the graphics card has been donated from an older PC, which is a GTX 1080, but it suits the colour themes for this particular build. And let's not forget, the final touch is Dipper. It's the Gravity Falls character, and he's Dipper Pines 240. You could pick anything if you was doing this sort of theme. I've just gone for that particular one because it suits the colour schemes of the actual full build. Okay, so let's get started and get things unpacked. So I'm going to start off with the side camera, and you can see in the top right hand corner I do have another camera running, and as the video goes in, I'll probably just switch over to the overhead camera so you get a better view of things. But yeah, so let's get the case out of its box and see what we get in here. Like I say, as the video goes on, I will speed sections up that need speeding up. So I'll speed this section up just so we get all the wrapping off and the bits and pieces clear of the case. So yeah, I'm just taking off the glass. It has a tempered glass side piece on this with some cellophane protecting the glass. Make sure you clear all the ports of any polystyrene, anything else that's in here. There's 2 screws in the front that keep the actual tempered glass on. Mine were loose on this case, but they normally are tight, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. So everything seems clear now. So then take the other side of the case off, put that to one side. In there's the box, an NZXT box with all the spares and instructions and screws, tie wraps and stuff like that all come with the case. So I'll flip over to the overhead camera now so we get a better view. On the rear of the case, you can see there's 2 hard drive caddies, SSD caddies. Basically, you can put your hard drives out of the way, so they're not shown on your build through the glass. Inside the case, you then have the all your cables, the NZXT box you see in the top there. That controls all your fans and the software runs on that. That controls the color schemes and the fan speed. So once you're comfortable that you know you've got everything unraveled, you can then put the case to one side for a second, just make some room just so we can get the motherboard out and check some of the components out on there. So I'm going to put my case just out of the way of the camera because it was just in the way of the side camera there, and then we'll get the motherboard out. So like I said earlier, I'm using the Asus Prime X570 Pro. The Asus stuff used to come with all sorts of stuff in the boxes, and considering this is quite a high-spec board, quite an expensive board, well, it's sort of middle of range really, but it doesn't really come with much nowadays. You get your couple of cables, couple of SATA cables, the pin-out port for connecting your headphones and the power socket and stuff, usual instructions with a driver's CD in the box. So you notice I put the board on top of the anti-static bag that it come in, and that's just to protect the components on it whilst we get on with the build. Okay, so unpackage the AMD Ryzen 7 processor. Make sure you keep the plastic bottom that it comes on, because you see on the bottom of the Wraith cooler there is some thermal paste, so just keep the plastic case it comes with, and you can just rest that on the desk so you don't get any pickup or any dirt onto the bottom of the thermal paste. I get the processor out, and as you can see, Ryzen 7 3700X. Okay, so let's get the CPU out of its plastic bubble wrap. So I'm going to indicate here, the red indication there is the small little triangle shape that's you match up on the processor to the triangle shape on the board when you're putting the processor in. So we're going to put it in at this stage. And make sure the clip is up on your socket. So it's just under my hand at the moment, but there is a small spring clip that's on at the edge there that I've just indicated there. Let's just make sure that's up and out the way. And then you can offer the two triangle shapes, make sure they match up on the board, and there should be no force required at all here. It should just drop in, so it's just in the corner there, the small diamond. So let it go onto the socket and it should just drop, the pins should just drop into the holes on the socket. Once they're in, then you can just pull the spring clip down once you're happy. So rest your finger on the top, no pressure, and then just pull the spring clip down and then lock it in place. And that's the processor installed onto the motherboard. So next up, we need to just check the graphics card and how that's going to sit. So we're not clicking it in, I'm just putting it into sort of rough position so I can see that, make sure everything fits. Get the cooler in your other hand and make sure that it fits in both orientation. Looks like it's all going to be okay. So I'm happy with the graphics card in relation to the CPU cooler. Then also I need to check where the wire is going to sit on the board. So on this particular board, the CPU fan header is on the top of the board. So you can see there, we're just making sure the wire is going to be long enough. Next up, get the RAM out. So as I said earlier, this is the Corsair RGB RAM, Corsair Vengeance. And all I'm doing is getting the RAM just to make sure that when I put it in at the actual RAM slot, that it's not going to foul on my CPU cooler. So click one of the nearest one of the RAMs in, and it's very tight there where it is. It will fit, but because I'm only using 2 sticks of RAM, then I'll probably put them into the grey slots that you can see there. Okay, so I could build up the cooler and stuff like that onto the motherboard out of the actual case, but for the sake of this video I'm going to do it in the case just to show that it can be done. So put the motherboard inside the case, make sure you get all the screws that come with the case ready to your side. I'm using a magnetizer, demagnetizer, which basically magnetizes the screwdriver so it makes it easier to pick up the screws. You don't necessarily need this, it just makes it easier and stops the screws falling into the board onto components and stuff like that. So now I've magnetized the screwdriver, I can now just offer them down into the screws and the mating holes that go through the motherboard into the case, and make sure we're not over tightening here, just nipping them all up so that it's comfortably secure inside the case. So again, like I say, I've speeded this bit up and then we've got it all screwed in. Happy with that. Make sure all the wires are going to pull through. Pull off the cellophane that's on the back of the breakout on the back of the motherboard, and there we have the motherboard in the case. So just a quick look at the manual here. You can see the M.2 sockets for the M.2 module, my Corsair M.2 960 module. There is 2 slots on this case, so there's one just there as I'm indicating with a finger, and there's also a lower one that indicating with the red box is there, the lower one which has got a cooler on it that mounts on top of the actual M.2 drive. Because I'm only using one drive on this particular build, then obviously I'm only installing one, and I'm going to put it into the top slot there. Now in the actual motherboard box, you'll see that I'm just opening the bag now. There is a M.2 standoff screw that sits underneath the actual drive itself, and depending on which M.2 drive you use will depend on how far the actual screw sits from the connector. So that's why I put the drive in first, just to see which screw it's going to sit on, and then I've put this standoff in. Then I put the M.2 drive in, and there's a little screw that sits on the top of the standoff, and then you just screw that into the standoff, and that clips the M.2 drive into the motherboard. Next up is the RAM, so I was going to click the RAM in, and like I said earlier, I'm going to go to the 2 grey RAM slots. I'm not going for the black ones because they were a bit close to the CPU cooler, as I showed earlier on the actual when I was doing the test and putting the cooler next to the RAM. So now I'm just obviously just checking where things are going to sit and making sure that I'm happy. You'll notice that the AMD logo is facing downwards, but I've done that purposely. It's not going to affect the cooling in any way, but it allows the cable to go around to the header for the actual fan. And this particular fan, it has the power cable, and it also has a secondary cable that connects the RGB colouring, which is controlled through, on my particular board, is controlled through the Asus app, which is the Armoury Crate app, which controls the colours of the actual cooler itself. Okay, so I'll flip the case to the back now. I'm just gone to the side camera again because to get the actual graphics card in, This particular case has a PCI riser cover guard on the side of it. So this is the one I'm just about to unscrew now. So there's a couple of screws on the top. I'll just undoing it with a screwdriver. But I'll take the main bit off so you can see. So that section there is the one that if you've got your graphics card mounted sort of front on, so it's facing the glass on the full face, then you can get a PCI riser cable and have it full show instead of it being side on like they're normally mounted. And then these are the obvious ones. So just take out the relevant cover on the back of the actual case, and then you can drop your graphics card into the PCIe slot. So on most motherboards, if not all motherboards, the top PCIe slot that your graphics card sits in is the one that usually runs fastest. So if you've got two PCIe slots, you'll see that if you read the motherboard instructions, you'll see that the top one is running at 16 and the bottom one usually runs at about 4. And in theory, you could use the bottom one, but to get the full benefit of your card and to make sure you're not throttling down on anything, then obviously use the top slot. You can see on this top slot, unfortunately, it covers the new chipset fan that AMD has ensured all the suppliers fit to keep the chipset cool. Unfortunately, that blows onto the graphics card, but to get the card running nice, that's the only thing we can do. So the last thing to do, well, not the last thing, but to complete the inside build is to put your character in. Like I say, I'm using Dipper because this is a Gravity Falls PC build. So I'll place him in. I've just used a couple of sticky pads on his feet. You can use blue tack or something like that. Stick him onto the actual white runner. And you'll notice I've got an Elgato card. I put that in after the build. That's just a game catcher card, which is sat underneath the graphics card. But that's not detrimental to the build. Next thing is put your glass on, which is tempered glass. Click it into position onto the case, and then apply your sticker if you're doing a similar build to this, or sort of copying this build along. Obviously, you need to purchase a sticker off the internet. Plenty of places are available, and then stick it onto the case. Now we have that done, the hardware build is complete, so we're now ready to go into the software and start setting the color schemes up. So I've left the glass off, the tempered glass off the side of the case, just so you can get a view on what's going on. So I'm going to have screenshot is on the left, and my actual PC on the bottom right. So you need to install the software, the NZXT CAM software, and then once you've got that open, there is a section in there that has a little light on it. And you click on the light, and then what this allows us to do is change the color of the case. So there's a light that runs sort of in line with Dipper where he is, which is behind the white strip, and there's also one that runs at the top of the case. Next one is the Corsair software IQ software. If you're using a different RAM, you will be using a different software. But if you have the Corsair stuff, then you can use this particular one. So open the Corsair IQ up, and then in there you'll see there's a RAM section. Click on that, and then you can pick the colors in here. Now you don't have to necessarily follow my color scheme, but I'm just going through the different ones here. I'm not going to go into too much detail into the IQ software, but you can pause and play this video if you're setting it up and as you're going along. But you can see I have mine set as green. You can have it all different things: pulsing, rainbow, sequential, all these different things. And as you can see, as I change the color in the software, it changes the color of the RAM on the motherboard. But like I said, and as you saw in the beginning of the video, I have mine set on green to go with the Gravity Falls theme. You can change the direction. There's all sorts of things. And if you get this particular RAM, there are multiple settings that you can play with, including speed and direction of light flow and all sorts of different things that you can play about with in the Corsair IQ software. I might cover this software in more detail in another video, but for this one, I'm going to keep it moving. Next thing is the Asus Armoury Crate. Again, this is not particular to my board, but particular to Asus boards. So install Armoury Crate. If you're using MSI, you'll have to download their software and use theirs. But I'm using Armoury Crate, and as you can see, I have it set in the effects, and I have mine set currently on breathing in green, but you can pick all sorts out of here, and I'll just flick on a couple of different ones, and you'll be able to see it change as I click on it. So as I click on the yellow, you'll see the cooler turns to yellow, and you can change different things in here. You can have it sort of, if your motherboard or the CPU gets hot, you can have it change in color and be reactive in that way. Dark mode, and what it also does, it not only just does the cooler, it also changes the subtle RGBs that are on this particular board. So if you have a gaming Asus board, it will change the colours that surround the board. There's one that I just indicated there with the red arrow, which is sat under the left-hand cowling, the Asus cowling that's sat on the left-hand side, just to the left of the Wraith cooler. Okay, so that is it. That is how to build a Gravity Falls themed PC using the new AMD 2019 processor, the Ryzen 7. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do subscribe to my channel. It always helps. And if you want to see more of my videos, please hit the bell icon. Also, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you didn't like the video. And hit me up with any comments below. They are always appreciated. And thanks again for watching CraftyDoctor on YouTube.